I believe we all have the capacity to heal ourselves. That each and every one of you, at some point in your life, have witnessed your body's amazing healing capabilities, whether it was from a cut, a fracture, or even an infection. I believe you know your body better than anyone else, and that if you listen quietly, you know exactly what your body needs at every moment of your life. Every single one of us, at some point in our lives, are going to be faced with a health crisis, questioning everything that we're doing regarding our health. Maybe it's because you're dealing with a health issue or someone you love is dealing with a health issue. And regardless of how well you were eating, how much you were exercising, how much you were doing the right things, there will come a point where there might not be an answer that will satisfy you. When my son at 2 years old was diagnosed with febrile seizures, it represented a low point in my life. I thought we did everything we were supposed to do to raise a healthy family, and yet there was no explanation. I felt like I failed as a father and as a natural health practitioner. How was I supposed to keep my patients and their families healthy if I couldn't even keep my own family healthy? But it was during this low point in my life that I was presented with a moment of clarity. I realized that just because the answers weren't in front of me at that time, it didn't mean that they weren't out there somewhere for me to uncover. And so I made a decision. I decided that I was going to learn as much as I could to find the answers when it comes to health and healing. And it was on this journey that perhaps some of you are on right now that I was lucky enough to discover a revolutionary new health perspective. Dr. Hammer's research on the science of German new medicine. GNM is a complete scientific system that explains the cause, the development, and the natural healing of diseases based on 5 biological laws of nature. It's based on this premise that whatever is happening to us at a physical level, at the organ level, was initiated by changes at the brain level, and that those brain levels changes were triggered by an impact in the brain from an unexpected conflict that affected our psyche. The beauty of GNM is that it finally allows us to understand why we get the symptoms that seem to come out of nowhere, that seem to be unexplained, that there's an emotional component that most of us have never looked at before, and that Dr. Hammer, over 40 years of research, has identified and mapped out the brain as it relates to our physiology and our psychology. The beauty of this is that it's entrenched in the science of embryology and human evolution, and that we can now, for the first time, not only have control over our ability to resolve our conflicts, but can be less afraid when it comes to our symptoms when we understand that they're based on biological conflicts that we experience in our lives. My main objective, whether it's in any clinical interaction or whether it's an online consultation or even in a live presentation or workshop, is to provide you with information that is going to minimize your fears around your health, and it's going to empower you to realize that you are in charge, that you are the expert of your body. We need to bring your awareness to that event as potentially the trigger that initiated this biological program that leads to your current symptoms, to change your perspective, to provide you with strategies and techniques and tools in order to look at that situation differently. I believe in your ability to heal yourself. Hi, Alvin De Leon here, natural health practitioner, chiropractor, and speaker. And thank you for tuning in to this 3-minute health tip. Now, in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned in my over 14 years of clinical practice in helping people get out of pain as quickly as possible. So in this video, I want to discuss really the importance and the value of understanding the emotional component of our physical symptoms. Over the years, I've studied many people's groundbreaking discoveries on the mind-body medicine and how our emotions affect us physically. But it's really been Dr. Hammer's research coming out of Germany, known as GNM, and the 5 biological laws that has made the greatest impact in my life and in my clinical practice. Pretty much it goes like this. When we have an unexpected event in our lives, an unexpected phone call, unexpected text message, unexpected email, unexpected criticism or comment or circumstance, we subjectively and subconsciously in a split second perceive that as some sort of theme. Depending on what kind of theme we perceive that phone call or that email or that criticism, it could be an anger, it could be an abandonment, it could be a separation, a lack of support. Depending on what theme we perceive it, it will instantaneously create an impact somewhere on the brain that's actually measurable on a CT scan. Now, depending on where that impact goes in the brain, physiological changes will be initiated in the part of the body or in the organ controlled from that area of the brain. And those physiological changes are what we then experience as symptoms. And so that's really the first biological law in a nutshell, that we have these unexpected events that happen in our lives day to day. We subconsciously and subjectively perceive it as a particular theme. It creates an emotional distress for us. It affects our brain and it creates changes in our bodies physically. So what does this mean now? What do we do with this information? Well, I want those of you right now that are dealing with some sort of symptom, whether it's a back pain, a shoulder pain, a neck pain, that seem to come out of nowhere, that you didn't have a mechanism of injury, you didn't hurt it, you didn't fall, you didn't have something happen to that part of the body. Instead, what I want you to look for is, prior to that symptom showing up, what emotional, unexpected stress or unexpected event or conflict was going on in your life, in your marriage, in your relationships, in your workplace, out with your family, and really look at, was that issue unexpected? Did it create a distress for you? And perhaps could it be that your shoulder pain, your back pain, your neck pain could be tied to that event? And then you try to resolve it to see if your symptoms will go away. So I hope that this video is valuable. I want you to do it right now. Go back to whatever symptom you're dealing with, what unexpected event may have taken place prior to it, and to see if by you being aware of that event, it leads to some relief from that symptom. I hope that this video was valuable. I hope to see you in our next video, and thanks for tuning in. Those of you that are in this social media circles, please find me on Snapchat at Dr. Alvin De Leon and also on Instagram. I'll see you soon.
Well, thanks, Alvin, for the always lovely introduction. And yeah, let's keep moving. We have a lot of things to cover, lots of questions to take care of. And what we were discussing, Alvin and I, is that I'm going to first summarize the main points of my introduction from last Saturday, so from our last meeting, because we got quite a few new participants. So, and this basically allows us, all of us, to be, as we say, on the same page. So Alvin, please, yes, disclaimer. The disclaimer, very important. This is only for informational purposes and not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice. So I'm going to first start with a very brief review of the fourth biological law. Okay, we can't hear this often enough. So thank you, Alvin, for the slide. And again, I'm going to ask you to help me with the mouse, as we say. Okay. Alrighty. Yeah. So based on the first biological law, we're going to tie everything in here quickly. So based on the first biological law, every disease, including infectious diseases, originate from an unexpected conflict shock, or DHS. Yeah, we have the DHS that occurs simultaneously in the psyche, in the brain, and on the corresponding organ. My friends, always keep in mind that this is a biological unit that works in synchronicity, and this is the psyche that is the basically the driving unit of the three. Okay, so the DHS activates then, as soon as it occurs, a meaningful biological special program that runs in 2 phases, provided there is a resolution to the conflict. Okay, this is stated and formulated in the second biological law. Now, during the conflict active phase, as we know, the correlating organ generates either cell proliferation or cell loss, depending on the embryonic germ layer from which the tissue derives. This is what's formulated in the third biological law. And the biological purpose of these changes on the organ level is to facilitate a conflict resolution. Now, during the healing phase, as we know, the affected organ is restored, and this with the help of fungi and bacteria. To review this part, fungi and TB bacteria remove cells that are no longer required, while all bacteria that are not TB bacteria participate in the reconstruction of tissue that is of the tissue loss that occurred during the conflict active phase. And this entire process is controlled from the brain that regulates this important microbial work. Now, concerning viruses, as we know, Dr. Hammer always spoke of hypothetical viruses because he found that the tissue restoration, for example, of the skin, of the nasal membrane, of the bile ducts, of the liver, and of the bronchia also occurs without the presence of a virus. That is, without a herpes virus, a hepatitis virus, or an influenza virus. And on the GNM diagram, it therefore always says viruses if they exist, because if viruses were to exist, they would assist the healing of ectodermal tissue. So that's important. And the healing and restoration process obviously causes now symptoms such as swelling, inflammation, discharge, night sweats, fever, yes, and pain because of the swelling. So with regards to the fourth biological law, we want to keep in mind 3 points. That's what you always have to remember. First, microbes work exclusively in the healing phase. So during the conflict active phase, and when we are not in a biological program, they are inactive. Second point, microbes don't cause diseases, but play instead a beneficial or supportive role during the healing of the affected organ. And most of all, that's important for our subject, infectious diseases are not contagious because every disease, including infections, originates in the psyche. So based on the 2 phases of every biological program, an infection cannot be transmitted to another person because the symptoms, whether it's a skin rash or a cough and so forth, are already healing symptoms. So we cannot transmit or pass on a healing symptom, so to speak. And moreover, a DHS is a highly subjective experience that happens at a very certain or specific time in a person's life. So when we study epidemics from a GNM point of view, we always have to find the common denominator, that is the type of conflict that was experienced by all those that are affected, showing the same symptoms. So in case of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are looking for a global territorial fear conflict. Okay, so this takes me now again to China, because now I'd like to review again, as I did last time, the coronavirus pandemic and where it started, so that we get a real understanding of what is happening from the GNM perspective, okay? Because this is really our job. So let's recap this. The COVID-19 pandemic started last December in the Chinese city of Wuhan. We have a map here. I sent this to Alvin. Well, there are rumors circulating on the internet suggesting that the spread of the coronavirus was caused by an engineered biological warfare agent that leaked out of a laboratory in Wuhan. Well, at the last meeting, I drew the attention to another laboratory, namely to the lab in the Wuhan Central Hospital, where a group of clinicians claimed that they had found a new coronavirus in patients with pneumonia. Now, half of the patients had a contact history with the Huanan seafood market. It was therefore assumed that the virus came from there. But let's face it, the other half of patients had no connection with the seafood market, so the theory doesn't really add up. But what's important for us, because we're looking for the DHS, we are working in the context of GNM. So the date of the DHS was January 11th, because on that day, the Chinese government announced that this new coronavirus was the pathogen causing the Wuhan pneumonia pandemic or epidemic. In GNM terms, this triggered a regional DHS, because with the horror picture shown in the media, the scare spread quickly through the city of Wuhan and eventually throughout China. And these scary pictures and the reports about the growing number of infected people, about the growing number of deaths, was also shown and reported around the world, setting the stage for a global territorial fear conflict pandemic. So this is to see the whole situation from the GNM perspective, or in the context of GNM. So we're going now to Italy, because Italy was the first country in Europe that got hit with the virus, to use the lingo of the newspapers. So why Italy? A brief recap, and I'm going to read this from the paper. On January 31st, the first 2 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed in Rome, where a Chinese couple from Wuhan had developed a cough and fever were tested positive for the new coronavirus. So this couple who had a cough and fever were tested positive for this coronavirus. And this is now the point. The same day, so on January the 31st, when they were tested positive, the same day the Italian government declared a state of emergency, right? Causing, in GNM terms, territorial feared conflicts in the Italian population. And of course, particularly because these people in Italy had seen all the scary pictures from China. Okay, so my point here is that this is the pattern that we are seeing around the globe. I saw this here in Austria, just as an example. After the first people were tested positive for the COVID-19, the government declared a state of emergency, enforced strict measures such as curfews, the closing of stores, of restaurants, of hotels, and other businesses, basically a lockdown with unimaginable consequences for the world economy. Okay, so the pattern, we saw this in China. Here are the clinicians, they are detecting supposedly a new virus. The Chinese government declares a state of emergency, shows the scary pictures throughout the world, right? And Italy was the first that was basically where this couple was tested, and it just went from there, right? So a typical DHS regional conflict that spread it around the globe. So it's not the virus that was spreading around the globe, but the fear, as we understand from the GNM point of view. Now I'm going to review again the test methods. The reason I want to do this is there is so much fear out there of being tested positive. And we also want to understand what people are actually tested for. So there are 2 kinds of tests. There is first the antibody test. That's easy to explain. The antibody test is based on the assumption that a rise of antibodies indicates the presence of a virus. But as we understand, antibody tests only prove the existence of antibodies and not of the virus to which the antibody test supposedly reacts. Okay, so only antibodies basically are evident, so to speak. The other test method is the so-called PCR test. PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. The PCR technique allows scientists to duplicate a small sample of DNA so it can be studied in detail. And in molecular biology, PCR tests are used to detect early infections. The PCR technique was invented in 1983 by the American biochemist and Nobel Prize laureate Kary Mullis. Why do I mention that? Because Kary Mullis himself, the man who invented this PCR test, himself stated, and I quote this again like I did last time, he said, quote, PCR cannot be used to prove the existence of a virus. Okay, so here's a man who invented the test, says himself that this test cannot prove the existence of a virus, and it's still being used. So this takes me quickly to Dr. Stefan Lanker. We heard lots about Dr. Stefan Lanker, right? He's a virologist from Germany. There's lots of information on the website, the virus trial about the measles virus and all these things were going on. So I want to just summarize what Dr. Stefan Lanker and Dr. Klaus Köhnlein researched. Dr. Klaus Köhnlein is a German medical doctor, and he's also the co-author of the book Virus Mania. Okay, so a book you have to read. I mention it very often also in my Virus Mania video lecture, and actually that's where I took the title from. So Dr. Lanker, as well as Dr. Köhnlein, demonstrated that what is believed to be viruses are in reality protein particles produced by the body cells, so within our body. Hence, what the PCR test detects are not viruses, keep this in mind. So here's PCR testing, but they are not testing viruses, but in reality, these protein particles. And so concerning the RNA of the alleged virus, and I quote Dr. Lanker, quote, in the case of viruses that are said to be pathogenic, the so-called indirect nucleic acid detection method only detects nucleic acid that is already in the body, so in the organism. So what we are learning here is that both test methods, whether it's the antibody tests or the PCR tests, are only able to provide indirect evidence of the alleged virus, including the alleged coronavirus. The virus itself, and this is the point, has never been isolated from a pure culture, which is the basic criterion for the proof of the existence of a virus. So although there is no scientific evidence that the RNA that has been found is part of a disease-causing virus, many scientific papers claim that the coronavirus has been isolated, a claim that is, as we all know, faithfully echoed by the media. Dr. Köhnlein, I did lots of reading over the last 2 weeks, several weeks, explains this discrepancy, and we should understand this, So because here is Dr. Lanker and others, and they say, well, this virus has never been isolated, right? And there is another group of virologists, they say, yes, it is. And Dr. Köhnlein explains this discrepancy, and I quote, in modern virology, the term isolation has practically lost its meaning. In today's virology, filtered blood serum that contains many biochemical substances is added to the cell culture. Hence, the alleged virus cannot be distinguished optically or any other way from other cell components. So this takes us now, Alvin, to the photograph of a coronavirus. If you show me not this one, the photograph of the virus, please. Exactly, So here we see a photograph of the coronavirus, and as Dr. Lanker always points out, there's photographs of all sorts of viruses on the internet. Photographs, he says, do not show a virus but particles of normal cells, okay? So on this note, I'd like to now introduce you to something new. It's also new for me. Again, lots of reading, lots of putting things together for us to understand. So I'd like to introduce you now to the research of Dr. Andrew Kaufman. Dr. Kaufman is a doctor of medicine at the Medical University of South Carolina. His presentations called The Anatomy of COVID-19 was only posted on YouTube 6 days ago, so last Monday on the 30th, March 30th. I highly recommend that you watch this presentation. Alvin is going to give us later the link. Okay. So now I'm going to give you a summary. So here we have an image or a picture taken from an electron micrograph. And in this picture, Dr. Kaufman shows, and took all this from his presentation, Dr. Kaufman shows a comparison of so-called exosomes and the alleged COVID-19. So first, what are exosomes? Exosomes are tiny sacs or microvesicles that are embedded inside every cell of the human body. What we need to know is that these exosomes contain RNA as well as proteins. Okay. In the left image, Alvin, in the left image, or the left image, I should say, shows a picture of a cell with exosomes budding out of the cell. Okay. So, yeah. Here, right, and also the big one, yeah. So the exosomes we see here, they're budding out of the cell. The image on the right, we go to the right side, the image on the right shows the alleged COVID-19 virus. There, we also see these vesicles budding out the cell in a circular shape with the circles on the periphery. Essentially, as we all can see, that they are the same. Okay, so it's exactly the same as what we see on the other picture. On the COVID-19 slice or image, the globular circles only show more pronounced. Okay, this is also what we see when you Google and search for the so-called coronavirus. This is what we see with these circles on the periphery. This is why it's called corona, because it looks like a crown, the Latin word, corona being the Latin word for crown. So we take the next image, Alvin. Okay, so the left image on this picture shows an exosome inside the cell. So it shows the exosome exactly inside the cell. So before it leaves the cell membrane, I'll get back to this later. The right image shows a COVID-19 virus inside a cell. So we see that they are identical in appearance. Both also contain genetic material in the form of RNA, as Dr. Kaufman stresses in his presentation. So since these exosomes are not distinguishable from the alleged coronavirus in their appearance, and since they contain the same form of RNA, it is very likely that COVID-19 is not, as claimed, a virus that invades the human body from the outside, but in reality, exosomes that occur naturally in the body. Thus, the PCR test does not test for the coronavirus, but rather for the host RNA of exosomes. Very fascinating. So basically, it looks exactly the same, right? And what is very interesting is that, or beautiful actually, is that Dr. Kaufman acknowledges Dr. Lanka's work. So in other words, Lanka and Köhnlein are saying, well, what viruses are misinterpreted. They are in reality protein particles that are in the body, okay? So what Dr. Kaufman adds here is the research about exosomes that also contain RNA and proteins, right? And basically confirming the work of Dr. Lanka, and just takes it a step further. But here's something fascinating. I was just getting the goosebumps when I watched that presentation. Dr. Kaufman also points out that under certain circumstances, exosomes leave the cell and are released into the extracellular fluid. So there are very specific circumstances that makes these exosomes leave the cell. Okay. Factors Dr. Kaufman mentions that induce that process are, and I quote, psychological stress, particularly fear. Translated into GNM terms, this means that exosomes are released at the moment of the DHS, for instance, due to a territorial fear conflict, right? So according to Dr. Kaufman, the release of exosomes can be induced by any type of diseases. For instance, when a person has an infection. So in GNM terms, during the healing phase, that is assisted by microbes like fungi or bacteria. So we can reasonably assume that microbes and exosomes cooperate in the healing process of the conflict-related organ or tissue. Thirdly, exosomes are also released, so Dr. Kaufman says, when a person has cancer. So based on the third biological law, a cancer develops, as we know, either in the conflict active phase or in the healing phase. These new findings would now explain why people test positive for this coronavirus without presenting any symptoms. For example, when they are in the conflict active phase, let's say, of a death threat conflict. And to quote Dr. Kaufman, lung cancer has many exosomes. Isn't that wonderful? So these compelling findings really validate Dr. Hammer's discoveries. And as you can imagine, I'm going to look deeper into this, and I will definitely write about this very soon and put it on our website. And because this is most fascinating, because it explains the whole test method, the whole failure of tests, and what is really going on, right? So thank you. I can only say Dr. Kaufman for this presentation.
You've got to do this thing where you create a boundary around your doubts, okay? So what you do, the moment you have that feeling of like, uh-oh, like doom is about to come, right? Things are not working, you've got to, yeah, I have it right now. So first, you have to be conscious of the conflict, okay? First, you have to know, what is it again that's going on? Why is it again that I have the chronic diarrhea? Why is it again that I have this palpitations? What is it again that caused it? So you have to remind yourself, you know, this symptom started because of that incident, that anger, that overwhelm. So you got to be conscious of the conflict. That's it. So now you got to get your phone or alarm clock and you set a timer. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you think you need at that time. You set the timer, okay? And the moment you set the timer, your job is to wallow in that anxiety and depression and worry and fear. You now, for the next 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you're going to think about everything that's going to go wrong in your life, why your life is miserable, why you're miserable, why your life sucks, why everything is horrible in your life. You bring it on. You see what I mean? But for the time that you set, you just wallow in it. You face it. Don't hide from it. It's like if you have a day where you start to feel like, I don't know what it is today. I sort of don't feel like myself. I'm feeling a little down. I'm feeling like, you know, all this stuff I've been doing, it's working, not working. Maybe it's a waste of time. Maybe I shouldn't be doing it. You start to get those doubts. And then see, okay, well, you know, I wonder why I'm feeling like this. What's really causing this today? Is there something that led to me feeling crummy today? Right? And then you got then just clock it. I say set it. I need about 15 minutes. Set the alarm on your phone and then close your eyes, whatever you need to do, and just bring up all of it. All of it. All of that nasty, dirty, depressing, sort of ugly feelings, like feel it, right? And then when the alarm goes off, though, you got to take a couple of breaths, right? And then this is where, so then you got to clean it up. Okay, so you take, when the alarm goes off, you take a couple of breaths, and then you do this simple visualization, where all you do is you close your eyes and you're going to picture a room. And it's got to be a room like 4 walls and a door, like a basic room. Okay, and in the room, that you pick. It's in your mind. Pick whatever room you want. It doesn't have to be big. It's just a standard room. It could be a room in your house that you see. On the floor in the room is going to be a bunch of papers. And on those papers are all of those fears and doubts and words. Don't even worry about what's written on it. Just know that there's a lot of them. Some days when you do this, there's going to be 30, 50 of them. Some days it's going to be up to your ankle. Okay, it doesn't matter. Just acknowledge that that's what those are. Today, man, look at all these papers today. I didn't think there was that many. There's a lot. Okay, and then you get to pull out the vacuum. So you need to somehow visualize. Remember those old R2D2 vacuums, which had like a thing like that or something, right? So you got to visualize this vacuum. All you're going to do is you're going to see the papers get sucked up. Okay. The cool thing about this vacuum, though, it's a special vacuum. When you suck up those papers, it's got a shredder in it. So you're going to hear the papers get shredded. Okay, you're going to see them get cleaned up. It's sucking it up, then it's shredding it. Okay, and then somewhere back here, it's got an incinerator. So you're going to smell those papers get burned. Yeah, I know. It would be cool, right? So and all your job is in that visualization to see the room, to see papers all over the floor. Those are all your fears, worries, concerns, anxieties. You're now cleaning them up. You're shredding them, and then you're burning them. And you can smell. And then your job is to make sure you don't get out of that room until every single paper is emptied or gone. There's none left on the ground. And it's done. You take a couple of breaths, close the door, get out of the door, wake up, get up, and then get on with your day. Okay, that's dominating your doubts. As we start to work with GNM, we realize that on the surface, right, everything about GNM explains your symptoms. You have a stomach issue, that's an indigestible morsel or an indigestible anger. You have back pain, you're feeling unsupported and devalued. You have a skin rash, that's a separation, right? Or you have anxiety, you're feeling overwhelmed. So we understand what's happening when we get a symptom, but I want to take it further. I want to take it a little bit deeper. Because when you look under the surface, why do you feel devalued when somebody does that? Why are you so angry when that happens that you can't digest it? Why are you fearing separation or wanting to separate? Underneath the surface is a type of fear. And really it's a fear over two things. That, again, this is my observation. The first is, in the end, a fear around our mortality. So why do you have those symptoms? Why are you worrying about your anxiety? Because I'm scared that if I don't address it or whatever, or if this continues, like I'm gonna die in some way, right? So it's a fear around our mortality, which is, again, we're talking now deep-rooted, biological, like everybody at some level has to face, or it's a fear of being abandoned and alone. At the root of everything, which is, when I started to observe this in the last couple of years, it really blew my mind how when you take somebody deep enough, it always comes down to those two fears. So why are you worried? So your neck issue has to do with you feeling intellectually devalued, you made a mistake. What's that about? Oh, it's about your son, because your son dropped out of school and now doesn't have a job and now had to move back in. Great. Why are you worried that you made a mistake regarding your son? Like, why do you feel devalued that it's your mistake? What does that mean? Because at some level, you're going to say, well, because then he's not going to be successful. And if he's not successful and doesn't achieve what he wants in his life and he's unfulfilled, what does that mean? Then I failed as a mother. Great. So if you failed as a mother, what does that really mean? So you're a failure. And everybody knows you're a failure. In the end, what's the worry if that's true? Well, the worry is going to be the criticism and rejection of people around. Like, I don't want to be seen as a failure. Great. If everybody now rejects you, the ultimate fear under that, what are you worried about? Well, I'm worried about being abandoned and alone. So do you see how, again, consciously when they're coming in with that symptom, nobody's thinking that the reason they're even having that symptom is because of a fear of being criticized, rejected, abandoned, and alone. And I'm telling you, it's, in the last couple of years, it's at the root of a lot of the issues, right? Why are you angry if you're having digestive issues? Why are you angry that your dad moved you to another school? when you were about to graduate? What's that anger really about? And again, it's going to go down to I'm upset because what does it mean? It means that my dad doesn't honor, I don't have any input in the family decisions. Okay, what does it mean if your dad doesn't have, if you don't have any input in the family decisions? What are you worried about if that's true? Well, that means my parents don't value my opinion, which means in some level they don't love me. And at the root of that is then I feel rejected, abandoned, and alone. You see how it's not logically, it doesn't make sense, but that's a subconscious fear that a lot of us really have, right? Why are you anxious about school or speaking in public? Like, why is that creating such a stress for you? You just have to speak. Well, if it's the first time I've had to speak at my job like this, I can't speak in public. Why? What's the fear? Well, because I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to say something stupid. I don't want people to laugh at me. Okay, what's going to happen if they laugh at you? Then I will be judged and criticized by my peers. And what's the ultimate fear if they do that? Rejection, abandonment, and I'm going to be alone. Once you realize that that's being alone is at the root of why that surface symptom shows up, you bring that to the surface and then you have to acknowledge why that's not true. That's part of the work. See what, like it's just not true. You see how that has to be the thing that you're going to have to recognize when you realize, first of all, that that's a tribal fear. Like I call it tribal, like probably back in the day when we were tribes, if you pissed off the elders and you got kicked out of the tribe, that pretty much meant like you're going to die. Right? So again, it goes back to like, I don't want to die, but then I don't want to be rejected or abandoned because I don't want to die. Like back then. But it's almost like subconsciously we're still running the same biological processes, right? We're still thinking that way. So when it comes to your mortality, I mean, it's one of the things that a lot of people don't want to talk about, and maybe, again, going back to constellations and appreciating what constellation people are in, if you're in a post-mortal constellation, maybe it's very easy to talk about death and dying. See, and if you're not in a post-mortal constellation, which is a sexual conflict and a territorial loss, that will put you in what's known as a post-mortal constellation, which means there's a fascination around death and dying. So somebody that's not in that constellation, and again, I don't know if I'm sure about this yet. Like there's a lot, since the constellation information is out there, that I'm questioning now about like what I really knew about stuff. But maybe it's hard for somebody to face death if you're not in that post-mortal constellation. I don't know, right? Like that's just my observation. I'm questioning whether that's true. But ultimately, you have to face the idea that you're going to die, or everybody around you that you care about is going to die. How can you consciously already be okay with that? Because again, it's almost like most people don't think about it because they're afraid if they do, it's going to happen. And I tell them, I go, well, I'm sorry to tell you, it's going to happen, whether you think about it or not.
One of the exams that everybody passes.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to pass that exam no matter whether you like it or not. But my thing is, once you recognize, again, if you don't have symptoms tied to that fear, no problem. But I'm telling you now, the majority of people that are sitting here that are probably got introduced to GNM in some aspect in the first place is because there's somewhat, it's going to be one of these two fears. Like, I'm getting sick, I'm getting symptoms. I want to understand why, because I don't want to die, kind of thing. So you have to address, well, what's the fear around death? And it's not an easy thing to think about. Again, you're going to have your own cultural, religious, depending on how you grew up, your own conditioning around that. But my thing is this. If that story that you're telling yourself around what happens when you die doesn't make you feel good about dying, per se, then change the story. Make up a story that makes you feel good about it. Do you see what I mean? How that's such a thing for me, this idea that, and again, I don't know if it's because I'm mythomanic, I always think of stories and being able to tell myself something that I can come up with to counter a previous thought or story. I don't know if that just comes more natural to me because of my own constellation, but my thing is anyone can come up with a story about what really happens when you die. Nobody really knows, per se. So can you just like think of your story? Does it make you feel good? If it doesn't, come up with one that makes you feel good. Because a lot of times people tell me, well, the thing about dying, it's the fact that I'm going to miss out. I'm too young to die. I don't want to miss out on my kids or what's going on. And number one, it's kind of like, again, this expectation that you're supposed to live to be 100, right? Where is that written? Like, Nobody said that. And number two, you only feel like you're going to miss out based on your story in your mind of what happens when you die. Do you see what I mean? So it depends. Like, you could come up with the idea that that's supposed to be called, like, this heaven and hell thing. That, like, you go to heaven and you see everybody that you've seen before or that's passed away before, and now you're connected with them, kind of thing, right? Or you can look at it that, you know, what we share with our kids, and I fluctuate with all of these depending on what's called for, the circumstances. Like, you know, when you're born, you're given a book of your life that has a certain number of pages, and those pages represent the number of years that you're going to live. If you're lucky, you're going to know when it's the last page. Most of the time, people just turn the page and they die. But sometimes you know, oh, this is the last page, there's no other page, okay, this is my last year. So that's kind of how we introduce them to the concept. That's why you have some people that have 10 pages, some people have 52, some people have 46, some people have 80, some people have 100 pages. We don't really know. But when you're born, you have that, right? And so, again, you come up with what makes you feel okay about it. And then maybe you come up with this idea of you don't really die, you're just, now you have an opportunity to be born again. Now you come back in a different, you take all the lessons you've learned and the wisdom that you gain, and then you come back in a different way, in a different body, with that knowledge, and the people that you were friends with and family members, you find a way to reconnect with them in this next life. And that just cycle happens. You see how whatever, there's no right or wrong here. This is your individual story that makes you feel, I don't have to worry about death now. In some way. Because I'm telling you, it's one of these two things that's at the root of what you're currently dealing with, and maybe what brought you to GNM. Which is why a lot of people are like, how do I prevent, right? Because I don't want to get sick. Why not? Because I don't know, getting sick means I'm going to go into a system that doesn't know how to fix people when they're sick, and then I'm going to die at the root. Okay, so let's look at that. What are you really afraid of that happens when you die? What's the story you're telling yourself? How can you be okay? Because, see, it's almost so sad that we get so consumed about not dying that we don't really live our life fully now, right? We're super cautious about how we live. We're worrying about the potential of all the things that you're going to get exposed to that's going to cause your untimely death. It's crazy, right? It's crazy how we think. But my thing is, if you acknowledge this, bring it to the surface, realize that here's what I'm going to tell myself when my family member dies, when my parent dies, when my kids die, when I die, my partner dies, whatever. And this is the thing, and I know it sounds crazy that, like, why would you want to think about that? But my thing is, like, why not? If it's causing issues up here. And again, on the surface, you're going to say, yeah, but I'm not worried about that. So then why are you worrying about whether you're being exposed to a chemical or not? Or whether you eat healthy or not? What are you really worrying about when you say that? What happens if you don't eat healthy? Then what happens? Like, so is it a vanity thing regarding how you look? Because then if I eat healthy, I look better in my bathing suit, and then people like me, so it's an abandonment issue because I don't want to be alone? Or is it, if I don't eat healthy, I'm going to clog my arteries, I'm going to have a heart attack, I'm going to die young, which is a mortality issue. So these, I don't know, find me something that does not at the root have to do with one of those two things, which is why people are doing what they're doing. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing if you tell me, honestly, I don't even pay attention to what I eat. I listen to my body, and at this phase of my life, I feel like I want to eat kale, quinoa, and salads and no meat. Why? I don't really know. I'm just not, I look at me and I don't want to eat it right now. Do you see how that's different? If you tell me that, I'm like, dang, that's good. You're really in tune with where your body is. Because you're doing it for no, it's like, I'm just listening to my body. My body doesn't really want that. It wants this. Cool. Versus, well, red meat, they say, is carcinogenic. And if it's barbecued for longer than this many minutes, like, it increases your chance. Do you see how, why are you doing that? Is it because of this? Or is it this? It's just going to be one or the other. So recognize it now. And I really think, like, to me, it seems so obvious now. Because people will tell me, like, no. How about this? Well, I'm really worried about this. And then I'll take them through the same step. Okay, why are you worrying about that? Well, because this, what's going to happen if that happens? Well, because this, and then what's it going to mean? Well, okay, I get it. I'm going to be rejected. And then, like, you realize it always comes back down to one of these two things. Always. right? So again, whether you're a parent worrying about whether your kid is performing well, right? Why do you care if your kid loves to dance and performs? Because in the end, it's going to come down to probably this. And because you know what everybody tells me? Yeah, but I don't care what people think. The moment you say that, I already know that's a tell. It's like the only people that say that are the people that really care about what people think. Because really, for you to even consider that, right? Because my thing is we all do. Why? Because in a tribal society where in ancient, if you piss off the elders or somebody in a group and they look at you in a negative way, you get kicked out. So we don't want that to happen. So in my mind, instead of kind of skirting the issue, just face it. I care what people think. It bothers me when people have criticism or criticize me. It bothers me when people think I didn't do a good job or I didn't help them. It bothers me. But you know what gets me through it? I see myself as my number one fan. Okay, that sucks. They didn't get better. They didn't like what I did. They're going to go do something else. That's cool. How do I learn from it and move on? See, that's why that's foundational. If you're your number one fan, which is what we talked about before, you're good. Versus you beat yourself up and then now you question everything and now it now infiltrates other areas of your life. Okay? So really look at when it's mortality, what are you telling yourself? When it's this is just another view where when I was in Australia, I was driving around with my uncle and he was, taking me all around. I was in Sydney. I was doing these presentations. That was 2014 as well. It's been a while. And he was telling me, he was randomly, he's like a devout Christian. And he told me in the car, he's like, do you know what the one thing is that Jesus was never able to do? He was like, he walked on water, he turned water into wine, he fed thousands of people, he cured the sick, all this stuff. Do you know what the one thing is he was never able to do? And I'm like, was this a trick question? I don't know. What's the one thing he was never able to do? He was never able to get everybody to like him. And so if Jesus could not get everybody to like him, what makes any of us here think that everybody's going to like us? See, so I remember thinking man, that's pretty profound. I got to use that. But it goes back to what I said earlier, which is the balance. It's not about everybody. Some people are going to for no reason. Some people are not for no reason. It's okay. It balances out. So what does that mean when it comes to this fear of abandonment? You have to see that balance, that celebrity conundrum, and you have to have a global perspective. Meaning, in a world of 7.7 billion people now, you will never be abandoned and alone unless you want to be. If you want to be alone, can you grow old and be alone? Yes. Why? Because you say no to people. Because you say, I don't want to come. I don't want you to come over. I don't want to connect. I don't want to get together. I don't want to forgive. I don't want to forget. When you choose that, yes, you could be alone. But that's your choice. See, if you're open, people will always come around. Why? Because just like it's in our DNA to not want to be kicked out and to get people to like us, it's in our DNA to want to help somebody, to want to form community, to want to create a connection with another human being. It's almost like it's part of our safety, right? Because if you're in your territory, somebody wanders over into your territory that doesn't know how the rules work in your territory, they look lost. Your initial assessment is, are they an enemy or a friend? If they're a friend, you're going to say, listen, this is how it works around here. You don't wander around at 4 PM, the lions come out, you're going to get us all killed. Let me show you how it works. That's kind of how we do it, right? Which is why there's this always natural need to want to help somebody, which, again, if you're a crook or a criminal, you use it against people. Because we want to help somebody that looks lost, that looks friendly, and that doesn't look like they're an enemy, right? So again, when you think globally, what are the chances that you can leave all the 5,000 people that know you right now, right? 10,000 people that know you right now, right here, and decide you're going to move to a country where you don't know the language, you don't know anybody. What are the chances today, in 2019, you can actually not only survive there, but thrive there? Meet somebody, connect with somebody. Oh yeah, I came from there. Oh yeah, I know this. Oh yeah, here, let me show you how it works here. And then you create a whole new community in that new country. Like a lot of people, that's kind of the immigrant story. Like that's what a lot of you are already doing. But I want you to recognize that in order to address this fear of being alone and abandoned, you just have to remind yourself about the world. You just have to remind yourself that, like, yeah, it doesn't matter that I can leave everybody here. I will never be abandoned because the world of 7.6 billion, 7.7 billion people, half of them are going to like me no matter what. I'm always going to have an opportunity to connect with somebody, somewhere, no matter what. Okay, so this is why I like to have, because what makes us afraid of being abandoned, it's a very focused local perspective. I'm worrying about the people in my ward. I'm worrying about my friends. I'm worrying about my family. Very local. I need you to look globally. And instead look at like, well, in the whole world, like, why am I worrying about this group? I can be anywhere and there's always going to be people that are going to want to support me, or they're going to agree with me, or they're going to want to help. Okay, so look at it from a global perspective to negate this idea that you will ever be abandoned and alone. It's only if you choose to be. But also realize that these fears are the things that are underneath most of the symptoms or behaviors that we're going to present with. Yeah.
So if you go through the process and let's say it's pain,
Yeah.
and you get better, but then something triggers it again, so then you got to start all over again. Is there anything that you can do to eliminate it once and for all?
Yes and no. Okay, so because the original issue, so let's say it's pain, like that case with that woman with her mother, right? Prior to the 3 years before she started going back to school and that whole thing, she never really had neck pain, right? But because of that shock, ever since after, I can almost be assured that anytime her mother makes any comment, okay, about her education, work, whatever, it could trigger a little bit. But here's the thing, this is why I believe what's great about this is it's almost like knowing GNM, it fuses natural healing with personal growth. Because the ultimate way that that doesn't bother you, or it bothers you so little, is the fact that you outgrow that perspective. You outgrow it. So you no longer see yourself as somebody that's not smart, if it's neck pain. You no longer, when somebody makes a comment, how can you be so stupid? It like rolls off your back because you're confident, because you outgrow it. When you're very insecure about your intelligence, any comment like, I told you to make a left, why'd you go right? That could trigger you. And then it's like, you get out of the car and your neck hurts. You see, little things. And this is why to me, this is so, it's almost poetic. Because it's like, there's never been a way for us to understand ourselves based on our symptoms until this research. So this is why, yes, you, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, all of a sudden don't get neck pain. But you got it since you were 18. But you go through this personal growth process where you become comfortable with who you are, your knowledge, your intelligence, what you have to contribute, that nothing anybody says about your intelligence even phases you.
But that's all work that you have to do yourself.
Yes, that's the challenge, right? Because sure, can I guide you through that, give you suggestions? Sure, but it's like a personal trainer telling you what you have to do to lose weight. You have to do the work. And this is why all of those cases that I see, to me, it's amazing. Because to me, like when I had my friend with the psoriatic arthritis in less than 5 months clear up his skin, it's not because of anything I did. I know it was a struggle for him. But he got off all medication, 7 he was taking when I saw him. He got off all his dietary restrictions. He was eating whatever he wanted. And he changed how he looked at his work situation. Because see, when it's a work issue, damn, that's going to be hard. You got to go there every Monday. Do you see? If it was like your rash has to do with your neighbor, but you move to a new neighborhood, that rash goes away quick. And that also explains why certain symptoms go away no problem, and other ones like, I can't get to the bottom of it. Well, it's because you're not addressing the right issue. It's your mother-in-law, not, the fact that you're eating gluten. Yeah, or you're eating. But this is why when you get this, remember, when you pick it's this, and it doesn't change, like, give yourself a week, but I'm telling you, you relax emotionally. It's like, oh, I never connected it to that, but you know what? This incident happened and that really bothered me. I guess I must have experienced it as a separation because it was like my rash. That makes sense. And I'm telling you, once you get to that, if it doesn't improve, then it's not that. So look for something else after a week. Okay, but that's how accurate it is. Yeah. So a couple of things I guess I can comment on regarding that. The first thing is regarding the diagnosis. It would be great if every diagnosis that they got was accurate to like exactly what the biological program is that they're running. Unfortunately, we can't rely on the diagnosis. So even though a lot of times it's going to be accurate, like they're going to say, well, there's a ductal carcinoma, there's a nodule on the liver, there, based on the diagnostic testing. But a lot of the times I'm more curious about what symptoms they're having and what organ is being affected by those symptoms. So you got to remember, they're going to be given an umbrella diagnosis. You have Lyme's disease, you have fibromyalgia, you have psoriatic arthritis, right? I want to know, that's fine, but what symptoms are you presenting with? How does it show up for you? And they may say, I have, right shoulder pain. And, I guess I must have had some itchiness or a little bit of a rash, but then I don't have a rash anymore, really. The issue is my right shoulder. Then I work with the right shoulder. So do you see what I mean? How, yes, it's important not to get too caught up in the diagnosis when they're in front of you, on the online or in the clinic. The question you want to ask is, what symptom are you currently dealing with that, maybe falls under a list of symptoms under that umbrella diagnosis? Then we're going to hone in on that symptom. Okay. So from a clinical perspective, that's one way to not get too confused, because then if you're trying to look up Lyme's disease or you're trying to look up psoriatic arthritis, you may be thinking, well, we have to deal with a separation issue, but they don't even have a rash anymore. Right now they're dealing with a shoulder problem, so you're looking for a relationship devaluation, right? So again, that's the key, is what are you currently dealing with, and we're going to use that as our guide in terms of what direction to take to find the original DHS, right? So that's one thing. And you've got to keep that in mind whenever somebody comes in with any diagnosis, because a lot of things can have multiple biological programs that could be running under an umbrella diagnosis. You need to know, how is it presenting for you? Okay, and that's why, like, somebody that says, well, it was diagnosed as Lyme's disease. Okay, but what was your symptom? And it might just be fatigue. Or they might say, I have a rash. Or they might say, I have a digestive problem, or I have a breathing difficulty. So again, the Lyme's disease doesn't matter. It's what are you presenting with? And then we go look there. Okay, so that's the first part of that question. So lips, so here's the thing. If it's lips, and like cold sores happens on lips, right? So anything to do with lips or skin, just think it's either outer skin or inside, under skin, or if more so will be in the mouth. So like canker sores in the mouth will now be more so. When it's the lips, it's still ectodermal. So it's going to be separation. So it's going to be like either I'm drinking something I want to separate from, touching my lips, right? So I'm eating something like, ooh, like this is rotten. I bit into something, my lips touch it, and I want to separate. Or kissing. Like you didn't say goodbye. I didn't get to kiss you goodbye. I didn't get to kiss you hello. Like, how come you? So again, it depends. It could be food, but I wouldn't call it a morsel conflict, because morsel conflict now is in the mouth. Outside the mouth could be is mostly separation type issues, but you could want to separate from a morsel. Like, I don't like eating this. You always make me eat this, and I hate eating this. Like, that could be part of it too. So do you see what I mean? Does that?
So here's the thing. So we really tried to read up on
the website. Yeah.
So we thought the closest was a morsel.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been, project after project, and now it's midterms, and he left this thing right to the 11th hour, and he had to do it or he got a big fancy.
Yeah.
So the next date was due. Once it was done, and we looked the night before, his lips were chapped. And peeling and cut and bleeding. Oh my God. So the next day, he submitted it. Fine. He didn't get zero, obviously.
Yeah.
His mouth was fine.
Yeah. But see, so we have to look at that, because, and this is where this is good, right? Because again, for me, from a clinical standpoint now, knowing sort of the biological program specifically, Now I have to look at, does he associate the kissing, let's say, like mommy kisses me when I do well versus I don't? Like, is school, academics, success associated with kisses from mom? Do you see how there has to be, because the thing you want to think about, and this is why this is a great question, when it comes to skin, okay, number one, you have to think something unexpected happened to cause your skin issue. Number two, why do you associate that unexpected thing with that part of your skin? It has to match up. And so when you start thinking that way, again, as a practitioner, you will. In the beginning, you're just like, well, there has to be a conflict around this. Well, school's a conflict. It makes sense, right? And because it did respond. But for me, I would want to know the detail of like, why do you associate good grades, school, homework with your lips? See? So because that's now what, again, from a case study perspective, I feel like it has to be tight. Like all the cases that I put up, I won't put it up if there's holes. Like I feel like, oh, I didn't ask this for the patient and now they're not coming in anymore. So I need to know that. I won't put that up because I need it that it feels like, well, everything fits nicely. So in that case, I would want to know, is it really the school, the grade? Is it like, what grade is he in?
He's graduating grade 12.
Yeah. So is it?
Everything counts.
Yes, but not just that. Does he have a girlfriend? So because you see how I've had cases like that where they have separation issues, which creates dandruff, which is hair separation. And we thought it had to do with, they were worried about failing a test. And they notice it around exam time, right? So I said, oh, makes sense. But why, does it make sense? Why does your hair on your head have to do with school, right? And so I said, tell me what happens if you fail. And she goes, and this guy said, well, I'm really, I don't care about my mom or anything. I'm worried about my girlfriend because she told me that she's not going to date some loser guy who's a fail. So number one, he's linking subconsciously failing in this exam is going to affect my relationship with my girlfriend. Okay, separation. Now I want to know, why do you associate your girlfriend with your hair? And he goes, well, actually, when we first started dating, that was one of the things that she liked the way I used to style my hair. Like, do you see how it's a subconscious association, but that's now tight? Do you see how, oh, it made sense why we thought it was the exam thing, but that didn't make sense. Like what it does get better when he does well on the exam, but not the way we think that, oh, it's because he got an A. It's because, do you see, because getting it, like biologically, that doesn't fit now. What does getting an A or passing an exam have to do with your head, right? But this is why, that's why that's such a great question, because I want, especially you guys, they're not going to hear this, I'll record it. But you see how as a practitioner and as somebody that really, really, really gets this, where your certainty and validation, it's like you're untouchable. Like, bring me the question, because I can tell you exactly why it's this, right? There's no wishy-washiness. It's because separation has to do with skin. And if I associate with that exam, I associate that part of my body with the separation. So again, going back to your son, it will make sense if I was asking if there was a girlfriend, if he associates it, or it could be you. Like, mommy gives me kisses
It's
when
always me, isn't it?
But I'm saying, but you would have to act, like, this is why, if I, see, that's where I would take it further.
Pleasing me so that I'm proud of you.
Well, it would be, he associates kiss, like, when I was grade 1, I remember when I came home with my first A or my first report card, and I got so many kisses from mommy because I did great. So now I subconsciously associate, like, when I don't do well or I'm struggling, like, I don't get kisses from mommy, and it affects the lips. Because that's how mommy, like, that's how he perceives it, even though he's now not conscious of that as a 17, 18-year-old. But when he was, do you see what I mean? So that's why in that kind of case, it's great because, like, he's starting to think this way. But you see how if you tell that story, or if he tries to tell that story, like why GNM worked for him, it's not going to fit. People will be like, but why is it your lip? Like morsels. So what? You wanted to eat a grade? You wanted to, but then that's your inside your mouth, not the out. Do you see how? And that's where, to me, that's what makes it. And don't get me wrong, like, you know the word, but think about, I have lots of colleagues that are practitioners that have been learning this for many years, and they do the same thing. And then I'll have to tell them, like, yeah, that's great that they got better, but that doesn't fit the way you're saying it doesn't fit. There has to be a way that we can tie it together, though, that makes sense. Right? And that's like that case of mine with the psoriatic arthritis where it got him on the hands, but it had to do with work. and him being moved from a different division and he was a cop. But like, why the hands? Like, and then he realizes, oh my gosh, when I hold the gun, like it's the skin rash is the direct point of contact with the gun. And the reason he was getting moved is because he was being charged because the guy that he went to arrest ended up attacking him. They get into a fight and he gets charged with police brutality. So he associates it with, if I'd only drawn my gun, none of it would have happened. But now there's a special investigations unit is going on. And so do you see how it's the meaning he put on it? And that's why it's only this part of the body that he initially got the rash. So do you see how it's so precise? And again, I think the only reason I can say this now is because when I started, I didn't look at things like that. I just be like, well, I went away. So that's, and then I'd give these case studies to Carolina to try to, she was like, well, wait a second. Why is it the left foot and not the right? Why is it? And again, that's where now it becomes tight. Because now if somebody says, why there? Why that foot? Why that part of the body? Why do they associate you with this skin? And that's what I mean. So it would be interesting because he might not open up about that to you because he'd feel embarrassed that that's how he associates. But who knows? I mean, another thing could be he has a girlfriend and he wants to impress the girlfriend. And he associates separation from the girlfriend with good grades and being a good student. And when he's not, do you see what I mean? Like those are the kind of scenarios that could play out. But it's great that he's thinking this way. But again, this is why, in my mind, taking it to the next level, there's just everything is tight. Nobody can question it, right? It's important to realize that, yes, there's that event, there's the shock, but then there could be an association to something in your environment, a taste, a smell, a feeling that could trigger it as well, okay? So that's how you start to realize when it comes to allergies that, well, for you to be allergic to shrimp at 12, when for 11 years you could be around shrimp or eat it, and now at 12 you can't eat shrimp, what happened at 12? Why at 12? And how does your body present? What happens when you eat shrimp? You see it? And then I had one case of that where they would break out, skin rash, and to the point that they couldn't even smell shrimp cooking because they would start to get a rash in their entire body. And as this person starts to learn, like, oh, interesting that you say that. And I said, well, rash has to do with a separation conflict. It means the shrimp is associated with something where you want to separate from or you miss. And he says, no, actually, it makes sense. It was around the time that my dad, who was a heavy drinker, would get drunk and he would actually chase me out of the house with a knife. And there must have been shrimp cooking, or my mom must have just been cooking shrimp for lunch, or it's like, so again, being able to make that connection, this person actually can be around shrimp to the point that they can actually start to taste it and not break out. The consciousness is important. Okay, so again, when it comes to allergies, I'm not saying you can just eat whatever you want. You have to identify what is this about based on when did it start? Why do I associate that with this part of my body? Why am I interpreting it that way? And was that food, smell, taste around me around the time that that conflict happened? Because why is it that that's still going on? And then just by being conscious of it and then changing the way you look at that it's actually safe to eat the shrimp, because I never had a real problem with shrimp. I had a problem with my dad chasing me when he's drunk with a knife, and that's not an issue anymore because my dad's passed away, or it's not an issue anymore because I'm now an adult. Then you can start to make it safe to be around that product again. Okay, and again, this is very important, which explains why a lot of people that will have certain allergies as a child, as they get older, they quote-unquote outgrow it. Right? How many of you have heard that? That, oh, well, they're allergic to nuts, and all of a sudden they're not. They outgrew it. So does your body just say, oh, it's safe now? Or knowing this idea that there's a psyche-brain-organ relationship and there was a conflict tied to that initial allergy, maybe that initial allergy is not an issue for that person or that child anymore. When you were 8, maybe that allergy to nuts had to do with, I don't know, something that your mom wouldn't let you eat ice cream before dinner. But now that you're 15, you can have ice cream whenever you want. So who cares about that? That's not an issue anymore. And now maybe that naturally resolves. So again, whether you're conscious of it or not, these biological programs are happening to us day to day. It's just now that you can sort of tap into it, you now have more control, you become more empowered regarding how to handle some of the symptoms or some of the allergies that you're dealing with. Okay? Right? Because remember, anybody, like even somebody told me the other day, it's like Epstein-Barr. It's like, well, I don't care the name. What symptom did you have? Right? And if they have a rash, we're looking for separation. If they had weakness in the leg, we're looking for a stuck. If they had fatigue, we're looking for a self-devaluation, right, or a pain. So forget that, the whole concept, because that's the thing now, right? Like everyone's gonna be freaking out about the Lyme thing because there's this new thing that I was just seeing about, like the ticks are now, I don't know, there's more, or they're exposed to it more or something. So now more people are gonna be conscious that, like, oh man, so whenever I have an unexplained symptom, maybe it's Lyme disease, right? Which again, it's tough because it sort of takes us a step back, because now we're chasing something that's like, again, this whole idea that nature is just mean and out to kill us. And that's why, to me, the fifth biological law is so critical, because no other health modality will even consider it. Because all the other health modalities are based on the idea that the body has to learn to protect itself. Because there's lots of dangerous things out there that are going to try to attack it. You see what I mean? That's sort of any other health, like the current model of health, natural, conventional, all believe that form of thinking, which is why GNM is so revolutionary, because it's saying, like, what the body can handle more things than we think. Why are we assuming we have to protect it? And that's why the whole immune system thing now sort of gets thrown out. Like the immune system construct is based on the idea that the body has to learn how to defend itself from external stuff, right? Because the thinking is it doesn't know what to do. If you don't build it up to defend, like an army, then there's not enough to fight. There's not enough things to fight. So again, that's based on this model that there has to be a war. That everything in the body is a battle, right? It's based on that thinking that we project onto the body, versus the idea that, like, everything works in harmony. Everything works for self-preservation and survival. So why do we have to build anything up? Why do we even have this so-called immune system available? Like, why is it not a support system that just supports the body when you resolve a conflict? See, so like, why do you need to boost that? Like your body only has a certain level, like a fuel gauge, or like its low, its ability to resolve a conflict or adapt to something is low, right? Yes, can you be under stress in your diet and all that? That still matters, but I'm saying, if you really look at it, I always go back to the idea that, like, all the research in the world, the Harvard 75-year study, all of the things from way back in the 60s and all this, the research shows that health and longevity ultimately comes down to good quality, stable relationships. Period. 75-year study, right? Longer before that. So nothing there talks about health, immune system, exercise, mental health, nothing. Zero. Taking into account all factors, good, stable, quality relationships. And so knowing GNM, that kind of makes sense. Why? Because any chronic issue that people have has to do with another person. Because they can't close that issue with that person. So that tumor is going to continue to grow in the colon because they're angry, or they're going to continue to have disc herniations because they're feeling unsupported, right? It always comes down to a person, ultimately a relationship.
It's like that Rosetto community,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the 60s. So again, Stuart Wolf, John Brunn wrote about it in the 60s, called it the power of the clan. And now you have Robert Waldinger, the last author of the Harvard study for 75 years, that's the last one to finalize it, is saying the same thing ultimately. They don't know GNM though, but the GNM now, it sort of supports why GNM is accurate with what Dr. Hammer's saying. Because it's your relationships, it's how you deal with unexpected stuff, it's how flexible are you, right? So again, it's ironic, and yet we still want to believe all this stuff that we're being sold, that you can do something about it and not worry about your relationships.
There is a question I couldn't answer.
What's that?
She says, okay, what about the vitamin C deficiency and the scurvy?
Yeah. Well, you could have, you gotta remember, you can have vitamin C, you can have all of these deficiencies, of course, which is gonna affect energy of the body.
Yeah.
Okay? So, if you now have a conflict, like, I don't know, you have to worry about getting killed because they're hiring slaves, or they're gonna come and take away your property, and now you have a conflict, the healing phase is difficult in any conflict. If you have no protein, no vitamins, minerals, right, your body's not gonna recover. So you don't die because of the vitamin C deficiency, you die because of cachexia, wasting away. You're under extreme stress. Those that have vitamins, minerals, protein available can recover. which is why historically the rich always could recover because they would have conflicts too, but then they have the food to give them the energy. So remember, vitamins, minerals, food, energy, which we need, which is why clean, healthy eating gives you energy to deal with severe healing phases. So that person in a coma, yes, they need supplements and all that because they're in a really severe deficiency. They need to build up their energy to be able to get out of it. So it's critical. But is it the vitamin C is what caused that symptom, or is it that there's a severe self-devaluation that affects the bones? And yeah, well, bite conflicts. They're not allowed to bite back. You can't speak.
Everybody on the ship. Everybody on
Yeah.
the ship has the same.
But again, it's not that it's necessarily the cause. It's like the same thing with coal miner's lung, right? Coal miner's lung, like the work in the coal, will have the black lung. But if you have an inability to get oxygen, those that feel it will, even though the lung is black, will now have lung cancer or die from it. Those that don't have that same feeling will have a black lung, but they don't have the cancer. Do you see, like, how do you explain that? They can't. So again, even the scurvy of the sailors, is it 100% all the sailors on the ship? Or is it the ones that have the psyche that feels like, I want to bite back, I want to say what I want to say, but I'm not allowed to say that to the captain? Now they will have problems with their teeth because they'll have bite
Because
conflicts.
that's how they perceive what's happening on the ship.
And this is why, again, it's the psyche is the part that we cannot predict, because like your kids, everyone's going to be different. Like people around you, everyone's going to be different in how they perceive it. And all you can do is at least be conscious of this, so that, okay, you know what, this is what they're dealing with. How do we apply it, right? How do we change our behavior so it can help them, if you even want to do that? Because I think that in the beginning you're just conscious of it, and then a deeper level is your behavior will change because you're conscious of it. Because in the beginning you're just being aware, being conscious is a big deal, right? Like because then that makes you not panic, but you're not necessarily ready to change your life significantly for it, but you're aware of it. But then the next level is like, no, your behavior now is dictated based on what you know, and that's a deeper level of knowledge. So you don't get scans, you don't do whatever prevention stuff, like you just, because I know what I know, or you do it but you're not worried about it, right? So it's different phases. Hey guys, just want to mention something that came up on an online consult just now, and it's with regards to being able to identify the original DHS and knowing the generalities that maybe this back pain or digestive issue or shoulder pain is related to something going on at work, let's say, or something going on in your relationship or your marriage. My suggestion, by doing that, if your body responds, meaning the inflammation goes down, the pain is less, then great. Just stay on track, keep doing what you're doing. Remind yourself that everything is in healing, right? But if it doesn't, or you don't get much change, then perhaps you have to be very specific and be more precise regarding work. What was the unexpected thing that happened at work before your symptoms showed up? What was the unexpected thing that happened in that relationship or in your marriage before the symptom shows up? So be very precise with the specific comment, the email, the text message, the circumstance that caught you off guard that could have contributed to their symptoms. And again, this is very important, especially if your symptoms do not get better or improve after you make that original connection. All right? Hope that's helpful.